There we go. Okie dokie. So we'll give it till about 1:45, and then we'll start moving forward with it. So actually, that we've got a few of our regulars here as well. So hello, Stephen, Louise, Mark, and Co.
It was good to see faces.
Yeah.
Turn everything back on again when I finish eating.
Oh, I don't mind you eating. I mean, there's no problem with that. There's no problem with that.
That's live on YouTube, and I have a problem with that being recorded.
Yeah, okay. Okay. You don't want people to remember you as the ever-eating woman. Something like that.
This would 100% be the time I managed to spill everything right down my front.
That's
okay.
Like every time I eat, I'm not gonna lie. It's always gonna get somewhere.
I only have that with soup for some reason. I don't know why. So how do you usually do this? You let people ask questions?
Yeah, so in a minute I'll go through my usual sort of preamble to this evening. And then in terms of running order, what we'll do is we'll get you to go first, Mike, if that's all right.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
And then we'll have a small break for popping to the loo, grabbing refreshments and so on. And then, you know, when in the before times we were doing this in person, that's when we would all go get pizza. But then we'll go in with Martyn. So we can do it. So depending on how you want to do it for your talk, you can do it so that you have questions during, or we can do a little bit at the end. It's whatever is easiest for you.
I don't mind having questions during. I don't mind at all. I'm not whatsoever distracted when I get questions. I mean, it makes it interactive. It's maybe a little bit more pleasant for the people listening. Okay. I need about an hour for this thing, maybe a little bit over. So that's okay for Martyn. He has about an hour. Okay. I don't know how much time do you need.
45 minutes.
Okay.
I think.
Perfect. Okay. I think they'll flow fairly well into each other as well, given the subjects we've got today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I didn't manage to catch you doing the talk on Saturday, Mike. As much as I was trying to, but parenting prevailed in that instance. So.
The wonders of parenting. Yeah, I know the feeling. I'm out of that already. Mine are 12 and 16, so they can parent themselves.
My daughter's only 8 at the moment, so she still needs that kind of little bit
of attention span. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it went well. It was I had only 25 attendees, but then again it was late in the evening, so yeah, it's good, but all fine. I can go for that. I'm doing it again on Thursday for Kung Fu. So
cool. I think Martyn, you're speaking at Scottish Summit this week as well, aren't you?
Yeah, on Saturday. Yeah, it's gonna be good.
I somehow missed the CFP for that one, fortunately. So
there's that many out around at the moment. I'm not able to keep track.
That's true. But that was on my wish list, and I totally missed it somehow. So thanks again for having me. I mean, it was really a thrill that I want you on my on my meetup. I was really pleased and honored to have me over. So thank you again.
Thank you for making the time in both of your days to come along. And obviously, thank you to all our attendees for taking the time out of their evenings after spending what is most likely their entire day on Zoom and Teams calls to come and do that with us this evening. So
exactly. So we try to keep it light.
yeah, for sure. So I think let's get started. And we can go from there. So let me just share my screen. Okay. So welcome everybody to DevOps Knots for February 2021. I'd like to first thank our sponsors for helping to provide the Zoom we're using this evening, along with JetBrains for providing a giveaway of a key for any JetBrains products for 12 months later on this evening as well, and for stickers, for providing stickers, of which we still have got quite a lot, because understandably we've not been through that many in-person events over the last 12 months. But if you are interested in receiving some of our stickers, then just drop us a DM on Twitter and we can go and sort that out for you. As always, well, Misha's actually not here this evening because she is taking a break because it's her birthday today. So happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
But if you like the sort of topics that you're going to hear this evening and folks talking about it, you can catch more of it with Misha and myself, Louise, who's attending, and a couple of other folks from around the community, and sometimes guests as well. Yeah, you can listen to the Agile Engineering podcast for that as well. In fact, we've got a new episode out during the next couple of weeks. We're just going through final edits now. With Tom Geraghty from last month as a special guest, where we're diving a little bit more into psychological safety and some real world examples of where it's not existing and where it has. So I mentioned that we've got a giveaway this evening. We've got a JetBrains product license. All you need to do to win that is to tweet with the hashtag DevOpsNots, and we'll do a prize draw, not at the end of this evening, because we've had a small technical issue with the randomized, I guess is the best way to describe it. But once we've got that sorted, we'll get that running straight afterwards. We are, of course, always looking for speakers as well. And if you're interested in speaking on any sort of DevOps topics, you can get in touch with us over on Twitter at DevOpsNots. And that could be anything from Azure to AWS to Google Cloud to supporting technologies and processes, or even on the cultural end of things that we'll start to see some of this evening as well. And tonight, we do have two fantastic speakers for you. We've got Mike Martyn from Microsoft, who's a cloud solution architect and technical evangelist there. And he's going to be giving a talk on the fifth element, which is Azure Secure DevOps. And then we'll take a little break, and we'll resume with Martyn, who's going to be giving us a talk on achieving your DevOps goals. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mike. So please give him a big DevOpsNots welcome. And thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you for that introduction. Let me just first start out by maybe sharing my screen. Else this will be a very boring evening. I think if all goes well, you should be able to see my little screen there. Goody, goody, goody. You are screen share. Oh my. I always find that am I not showing anything on screen which shouldn't be there? So, oh, good. All right. Thanks again for having me. I bid you all a good evening in the UK from Belgium. And I'm going to talk to you about the fifth element. I hope everybody saw the movie, or everybody gets the reference to the fifth element. If not, I can explain you in a GIF. So this movie by Luc Besson, which is in my eyes, one of the better sci-fi cult movies ever made. There's this concept about the four elements of life: water, earth, air, and fire, which are gathered around a fifth element, played by the wonderful Mila Jovovich. Sorry, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen the movie. Sorry, you should have seen it already 25 years ago. So there's that. Which is being created out of some genes, like a gene pool, and those elements surrounding it make that fifth element the ultimate warrior. And at a certain point in time, in the beginning of the movie, there's this archaeologist who is looking at hieroglyphics, and he's translating the hieroglyphics and said, in their possession are the four elements of life. These elements, when they are gathered around a fifth, the supreme being, ultimate warrior, created to protect life. So this is really a warrior. Yeah? This is this fifth element where they are talking about. Now, the funny thing is, actually in development, we also have 4 pillars. And when we expand that to the entire universe of DevOps, where this little word comes in, there's this one pillar that is always lacking from many aspects, and we should pay a little bit more attention to it, which is there to protect us, which is security all over the place. So this is a little bit the link that I'm putting in here. So this 5th element will be as we call it, the red wire through my presentation tonight. So who am I? I'm Martyn. As Liam said, I'm a technical evangelist at Microsoft for Belgium for the OCP organization. So I work with partners and ISVs, and I preach security next to everything related to Azure and DevOps and GitHub and all these things. I also am an ex-MVP. So I saw that Martyn is an MVP. I'm an ex-MVP in Azure. I run a user group in Belgium called the Azure. Martyn Baljo from JetBrains is also running that. So there's a link here with the JetBrains giveaway tonight. Yeah, so if you want to have contact with me after the session or during the session, or if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. Be wary, it's some people call it a big data stream, because I tweet too much apparently. So it's on your own risk. And else you just can drop me a mail or find me on LinkedIn. I'm also there. My code name is there, TechMike2kx, so you can follow me. So back to the topic of the evening. So I have this as an agenda. So first of all, we have, let me just see if I can just do this away. Can I just remove this thing? No, because this is annoying. Can I? It stays. Okay, never mind. So this is the agenda, what I have for you tonight. So for those who know Azure DevOps, you recognize the screen, and I just made this flow in there. So we're first going to talk a little bit about what the core is, or is secure code. We're going to start off with that. And we start off with secure design, which is the first pillar. Then we have secure coding, which is the next step. And then we move over from secure coding into secure building with the sub-steps of secure scanning, secure depth, and secure dependency management. And then over to actually the secure ops with secure deployment and secure monitoring all at once. So this is what we're going to talk about during the rest of the session. So let me talk a little bit about the life cycle of an application. We all know application lifecycle management. You're all in a user group which is bound to DevOps. So I'm not going to explain to you about application lifecycle management, but there's something which is actually living next to that, which is a security development lifecycle. And this is something Microsoft already had this a couple of years ago. It's not a Microsoft specific something. There's other practices that are doing SDL or SDLCs, but we have a framework for that. We started out with that in the 90s, and we are still building on top of that. And the most important pillars in an SDL is that you educate people and that you create awareness, have correct training, and also make sure that you, before you start any kind of project, that you have a decent requirements gathering of all the risks that are there in your environments, in your solution, and in your ways of coding, and in all the tools that you're going to use. So this is really important as a first step. Then when we are in the process of doing development and creating an application, we are in the way of going through the design, which we typically do when we do application development. We design an application or a solution. Then we start to look at the implementation, and then we verify. The same thing happens in security. Only the verification here is more on the way of are we mitigating risks? Yeah. And then at the end, we have the accountability, because once an application is deployed, it's no longer in the hands typically of the developer. It's more in the hands of the operations guys. And today, it's more a shared responsibility. You also have the accountability of managing that application in a safe way. So you need to make sure that it gets released in a safe way, that there are no loopholes. I'm not going to mention any nice competition or any nice IT factory that we know of the last months that have been in a very bad news, unfortunately for the guys of SolarWinds, because they couldn't really do something about it. Or they think they couldn't have, but probably somebody got in with social engineering, had some weaknesses found inside of their organization. That way they got hold of the application lifecycle tooling. But you should have the accountability also afterwards when you release. So you need to make sure that you scan for vulnerabilities and all these things. And in case something really goes wrong, you also need to have a decent incident response. So these are the things that are actually building up a full SDLC. Now, by the way, if there are any questions, feel free to interrupt me. Unfortunately, I cannot see the chat window anymore. I'm sorry, I'm not used to Zoom. I'm typically in the team sphere, so call me a little noob on this one. Is the chat? Yeah, here it is. I can see it now. All right, best movie ever. All right, found it. So, so if you have questions, feel free to interrupt me either by voice or by typing it in the chat. I am not following the YouTube one, but Liam, I think that if there's any questions there, you probably just pick them up.
All over it for you.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So this is a little bit on the SDL. Now let's take a little bit on some of the pillars that are underneath it. What you really need to do. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I'm just going to mention the most important ones. First of all, security requirements. Know what your solution should be handling about, and know what your solution should be protecting. Because typically you are building a solution, whether it's a line of business application, where it's a public-facing website, there's always some data that you need to protect. There's always some systems that are being accessed. So you need to make sure that you define the full security requirements. And then you start doing something we call threat modeling. And threat modeling, I'm going to go into it a little bit deeper in just a few minutes. But threat modeling is something that you can do even after the facts, just to visualize and make sure that you understand how your system is working. Next to that, make sure that you use approved tools, and that you, with your entire DevOps teams, I don't like to use that word, but everybody who's involved with your DevOps way of living, with your DevOps culture, is that you agree on the tools that you're going to use, and that you do decent research on all the tools that you have. And that you just don't use any open source tool where everybody can access it, but maybe take a look on what is happening there. Now, there are good open source tools that can do decent security, don't get me wrong, but investigate on the market. And then the most important part is that you do decent automation. And for those, we have SAST, DAST, we can do penetration testing, and have a good monitoring on those during your entire line of development, right? And we typically, from within a secure DevOps sphere, we also want to do something what we call a shift left, making sure that developers also get impacted from the beginning, not only during the build phase, but also during the coding phase, and that they get aware, again, for that awareness and that training part, that they get aware what they are building and what kind of risks they are implementing inside of their solutions. Okay, so let's take a closer look to the design phase. Now, Microsoft in the 90s invented an acronym. We're really good at acronyms, by the way. We have so many, and sometimes we reuse acronyms again all over the place, like ACS, for instance. And we already had an implementation of ACS 3 times in Azure, Access Control Service, and then now it's Azure Container Service. You know, you get the idea, right? But we had an acronym in the early 90s, in the late 90s, called STRIDE. And STRIDE was made to help threat modeling make easier. So STRIDE is actually standing for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. Now, all these things can happen in a solution. To give you an idea, you can do, for instance, elevation of privilege by first proofing and impersonating somebody, and by saying that you are not who you are, and by gaining access to a system, and then giving yourself more access and more authority inside of a solution. So that way you can have a lateral movement, let's say, from a website into a full SQL database at the end of the system. So that way you can have a real flow inside of an organization, right? So these 6 elements, they make up Stride. So these can be used to qualify all the risks that you have inside of a model, inside of a threat model. Now we have another acronym called DRIT, and DRIT is more the scoring mechanism behind Stride. So we're gonna give points based upon the damage potential that it can do, how it can be reproduced, how it can be exploited, what the number of affected users are, and what the discoverability of it is. So in these 2 acronyms and these 2 way of thinking will actually make up the complete threat modeling. Now, there's a couple of good books that you can read on threat modeling. There's the threat modeling book. It's a book from 2014. Must read. It will help you understand how you should build a threat model. But threat modeling isn't that hard. You just need to keep in mind what you're doing. So first of all, what are you building? This is the main question. What are you building? This is your model. And your model, you're not going to do it like you do a UML. So you're not going to build interfaces and take a look at all the internal classes that you have. No, it's more on how the data will flow and how your system will flow from A to B. That's the important part. Okay. So what are you building? Very important. Identify it. Next thing is, what can go wrong? Identify the threats. So if I log into a website and I have a standard user with a standard password inside of a database, what could possibly go wrong? You know, that's a question we always ask. What could possibly go wrong? Well, this is the moment that you actually need to ask you, what can possibly go wrong? Then what are you going to do about it? Mitigate. Have a mitigation in next to that. Yeah. We have a website, but we can also have a website on HTTPS, and you already use a certificate where we can gain some trust with it, and so on and so on. So you get the idea. And in the last part, validate. Do a validation. Did I do an acceptable job from point 1 to 3? Okay, so this is a little bit how threat modeling is working. Now, we have at Microsoft a free tool that can help you. There's plenty of tools in the market. There's a couple of expensive ones that you need to buy, but they're worthwhile, especially if you have a security office that can actually do that, or security architects that can help you with it. But if you want to start off light, and even if you already have a solution and you want to make sure that the new things that you're building or the solution that you've built is handling security correct, you can at least use this as a validation or a checklist to do improvements. So you can start anytime, but best is of course to start at the beginning, because you need to gather your requirements. So we have a tool called TMT, not the Teenage Mutant Turtles, so threat modeling tool. And by the way, all my slides, they have this little QR code. They have a quick link, so you can have easy access to all the tools and all the documentation that I'm going to show on all these slides. So that makes it easy for you. So TMT is free. It comes with a click once installer, and it gets updated once every so many weeks. It has a template for Azure specifically, which also is open source, that can be that you can contribute to into a GitHub repository. So that's fully open, and you can help out to improve it. But what wouldn't be better if we just was going to show you how it works? So basically, it looks a little bit like a how you call it, a Visio diagram or a draw IO diagram, or a just a Lucid chart, or whatever you want to using today to draw visualizations. Now, what you're going to do is you have all the elements, as you can see here. So you have Active Directory, you have Advisor here, we have Application Insights. So typically you're going to drag all the elements that you're going to need onto the screen. You can connect them with these lines. Now, it's all these elements together that build up a risk or an issue. To give you an idea, a operator or so an end user is using a browser, and that browser is connecting to a public web app. So we have a browser, and that browser, what can it do? Well, you have some properties here that you can set, where there's an isolation level, whether it can accept input, and so on and so on. So you need to set all these properties. On the endpoint, the same thing. It's a web app. It's a public web app. It's of the type PaaS in this case. You have some mechanisms of authorization that you can set. You can even do some credential storing and all these things that you can set. And then you need to connect them both by means of a connection. And there you can set the properties of this connection, whether it's HTTPS, whether it's physical network, and all these things together. They build up all the risk. Now, good, I can draw something. Now, the real strength is actually when you take a look at the analysis view. So if I go over to the analysis view, you will get a full list with all the different risks based upon our stride categories. So we have our denial of service here, we have our spoofing, our tampering. I don't see any repudiation here. There probably will be one, but typically they don't come along that many. Yeah, but as you can see, there's so many things that can go wrong in an entire drawing. So here you can see all the different things that can go wrong when drawing a standard application. Now, this list can be used as a mitigation and checklist to check off your sanity of your application, your secure sanity of your application. So what you can do is you can highlight one of these lines and you can say here, it needs investigation, it's not applicable, or it's mitigated, or not even started if you still need to start working on it. And this list can then be managed by means of Excel, because you can download it as a CSV file and you can re-upload it as a CSV file. The coolest thing is that it can also generate reports, a full report. So you can create a full report here. And for speeding up, I already did that. I just need to go to my browser here. So, and here you have the full report. It prints out the full drawing, but also every single aspect that comes with one of these numbers is being highlighted separately. So here you can see all the different security risks that are happening inside of these little areas. So we have an elevation by changing execution flow in Active Directory. This is all the flow around Active Directory. So this will help you to be checking off on all the risks that are happening in your solution, and you can use this really as a checklist. So I wonder, question to the audience, were all of you aware of TMT, that it is a free tool and that you can use it and really get started easy? I don't know if I'm gonna get many responses back, but
I've heard of it and I've installed it, and that's as far as I've gone with it.
Okay, but I see everybody going, oh, first time I've seen it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, good. So start using it and start thinking about how you build up your solution. It's really easy to get started. And again, the goal of my presentation tonight is to make you aware of the easy ways of getting started in security inside of a DevOps stream, whatever kind of DevOps you're doing, whether it's through Azure or I'm just a Microsoft fanboy and I need to deploy things to Azure. But these are the things that are actually happening from a security perspective that I can offer you for free. Most of the tools I'm going to show you tonight are for free. So it would be stupid not to start with any of those, although it comes with some knowledge that you need to train yourself on. Again, the first step that I taught you about. So is it, yeah, so the model that I have on screen, let me go back to this one. So this is a model that Microsoft built for the, it's a security and compliance blueprint for a UK official public website. It's downloadable from one of our websites. I have a couple of samples, but this is a really good one because it has all the as all the little things that are actually needed in an application to show a full flow of an application. As you can see, it has a web app, it has an API, it gets a key in Key Vault, and then goes back to the database. So it has some standard basic good designs, but I also have one, for instance, and I can show you that. So if you start off the application, you get, yeah. Okay, so to first start, somebody want to ask something, say something. You can create your own model. You can open a model which is already there, and there's templates that you can even build your own templates. And there's a couple of templates that you can start off. There's an SDL knowledge base template. There's a medical device model, which is a new one since a couple of months. So if you're in medical care and healthcare, you can actually use this to threat model your medical devices. Yeah. I also have one on IoT. I'm going to try to open this one. And this is also a standard one that we have. These are the ones that I typically use because they have a good layout and a good, decent set of rules behind that. Okay, so you can find these on one of our websites. Look at the threat model site. You can find that website under. Where's my other browser? Here we are. You can find that specifically under this site, and there are some, I think there's some sample files already there in the resources, if I'm not mistaken. So here you go. Okay, so try to use it. Oh yeah, and also Threats Manager, which is also a free tool by Simone Curzi. He works on Microsoft now, but he created a manager specifically for managing all these risks that are in here. So it makes it easier to, like, not selecting all, but multi-selecting and managing multiple risks at the same time, deleting them and fiddling around with them. So you can download them and upload them back into threats modeling tool. Also very cool is the output is just an HTML file. So you can just transpose that back to an MD file or keep it as an HTML file and put that in your wiki, for instance. So you have some additional benefits there and have a security wiki where you can have a collaboration on top of that. So I'm happy because already people have learned something. So I already attained my goal. Me happy camper. All right. So that's on the design phase. Now there's other tools in the market too. I know there's some really good paying ones, but typically you need to sell a kidney and a liver to get a license. So they come as a person, you're not going to buy these, but this is really good to start off simple and quick. And a lot of people find the documentation pretty well. They've put a lot of effort in it the last 5 years. So it's worthwhile looking at it. Okay. Now, next part is a secure coding part. Since I am in a DevOps user group, I have no idea how many of you are developers, how many of you are in the operations part, and how many of you are just managers or stakeholders or whatever. But this is the more on the developer side. The one thing that I'm gonna develop here with a toe in DevOps. Okay, that's funny. Everybody is in DevOps. Because you're a developer, you're part of that culture. It's a culture thing. So, and we should discuss that next time we see each other in real life between beers, because that would be the best discussion ever. But the one thing that I really want to make sure that developers understand tonight is that you start off with the main responsibility. You should see security as an onion, and it's not an ogre thing. I mean, but security has layers. And apparently an ogre also. Don't ask me why. But at the core of a solution is the application code. So a developer really has a lot of impact when it comes down to security. I'm in the manager, so I'm a different category. Goodie. So security is really a part that everybody should manage. So you really should embrace the shift left motion, meaning that you should do as much as possible from your IDE's part. I'm going to show you a couple of tools and a couple of tricks that you can use to make security a little bit more easier as a developer. Now, first of all, I'm going to start off by using and unfortunately, it's for .NET only, but you can use the same principles with any other language. If you're doing Azure, the one thing that you want to avoid is moving secrets and keys and tokens inside of your code. You're not going to hard code it. You're not going to hard code connection strings. You're not going to hard code tokens, API keys, whatever. You're not even going to put them in Whippet configs. Yeah. So repeat that. We're not going to put them anywhere in our code. Anything which is code based. Okay. We're going to put them into something where they belong, which is a key management system or a KMS. Right. Now, one of the key management systems that we have in Azure is Key Vault. Now, some people find that a little bit awkward to put a key in there and they don't know what they're getting. So there's a good talk on identity in Key Vault by my dear friend Christos Matkas. He used to live in Manchester in the old days, but he's now in Redmond and he's leading part of the identity team on the marketing phrase. And he had a very good 425 show 2 weeks ago on identity inside of the DevOps lifecycle. I can give you the link afterwards. I put it in the chat if I can find it back. The key there is that you don't have any secrets managed. You only have your users and your service principals that are accessing the Key Vault. Now, this little NuGet package will actually help you manage those secrets and putting them into Key Vault and getting them back easily from Key Vault. So there's another thing that you need to take away as a developer is never put secrets inside of your code. Now, if you are on a Monday morning and didn't have enough tea or coffee, and you do check in your code with secrets, what would happen? Well, we also have tools for those. Now, for those who are still running Visual Studio 2017, you can run this in the IDE. Unfortunately, we did not bring this to 2019. But you can use that same crit scan still in CI/CD pipeline in Azure DevOps and even in GitHub. It's going to come to GitHub too from a scanning perspective. But for the for Azure DevOps, you need to be a Microsoft Premier customer. Unfortunately, we're not going to give it for free. Unfortunately, because if it were to me, developers should just get this for free. Cool thing is what this does is it actually scans your code as a Roslyn analyzer and looks for weaknesses which are resembling passwords, tokens, and so on and so on. Now, if you're using GitHub as your repository system, we do implement this for any kind of code, not during a build phase, but from the moment that you check in. We do crit scan based upon your repository. Now, it comes for free with public repositories, and we warn you by email if there's something wrong, like if you tagged in, let's say AWS tokens or Azure tokens or passwords and connection strings, for instance. Yeah, but it isn't really that flexible to look at all the files where credentials are. But if you have the paying version of GitHub, we do have this implemented. And I'm going to quickly show you something. So this is our GitHub environment, which I can show. And I have here a just a repository. I think it should be, yeah, it's this one. No, it's not this one. Darn it. Come on. I have all my things open and I forgot to open. Yeah, it's this one. Okay. So, and there's a security tab now in a paying version, and also a part in the free version. One of the things that we have is secret scanning alerts. Now, this will actually do crit scan under the hood, but it's implemented on a level of the repository. And as you can see here, I don't know whether you can see it well. Let me just zoom in a little bit. As you can see here, I did a bad thing. I actually put in a credential, even worse, a connection string to a database. That database, which is a fake database, you can try it. It's not existing. So demo foobar dev. Yeah. What I did here, I also checked in my user and my passwords. As you can see, this will hurt bad. Now, the cred scan actually picked it up and it will be blocked. from within your code. So you cannot use it anymore. And from here out, you can actually start investigating or doing a issue management on top of that and blame the developer, whatever you need to do, and make sure that this credential gets out of there and that it gets put into a key vault and that secret gets managed elsewhere. Okay, so this is a really cool way of avoiding oops moments and where weaknesses inside of your code can be abused by crawlers that are looking for keys or tokens, for instance. There was a couple of years ago, there was this crawler that actually went looking for S3 bucket API tokens, which then could be used to create VMs on that same subscription in AWS to start Bitcoin mining. So, so the things that can happen with just a little bit of credentials, the results can be painful afterwards because it will result into an invoice on AWS, which you don't want to pay. So try to avoid that, and CredScan can actually help you with this thing. Now, even from a coding perspective, we have a couple of free tools that you can use, and one of these free tools is IntelliSense. Security IntelliSense is a ROSIN analyzer that you can use in Visual Studio, which uses secured coding practices. There's also DevSkim that you can use in both tools, in both Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, but also IntelliSense is working on both systems. And what this does, and I'm just going to show you first in Visual Studio. I have it open here. Here we go. So in Visual Studio, I have a sample application, and this is referring to storage. I have an Azure Storage example. I have a Service Bus example. I have an Active Directory example. And as you can see here, there's squiggly lines. Of course, there's always squiggly lines in an editor. But if we run over it, it should be, here we go. So if we take a look at the definition, you can actually see that it's security IntelliSense. The HTTPS or HTTP option is insecure as it allows the use of HTTP. So HTTP is typically an unsafe protocol. So this should by default be HTTP. You will get a priority. So an error is high vulnerable. An exclamation mark is just a warning, just something that you should try to avoid. And you get a good way of looking at your code in that kind of a way. You even get a full extension on what kind of API operations it is and how these things work. So you can actually take a look on, I can open this thing, and normally if all goes well, I should still have access because they're changing the code behind it. This is my browser is opening, but it was on a different screen. So it still moves to the docs, and it will give you the explanation what you should do in a correct, safe way to move with your code. Okay, so and this will give the entire list in real time, and it even will give you, as you can say, potential fixes. And it works like any other ROSLAN analyzer. So this is for Visual Studio, and as you can see, it will work on multiple levels. It will highlight in the lens. It works like a charm. Even in Visual Studio Code, you have the same principle and the same extension. So you can install this extension. So this is called security. Just look for it. It's this one, so little shield with the lock and tooling and a little cloud in here. And as you can see here, this will actually come back with, for instance, here I'm doing some random coding as a provider. And as you can see, it will give you, and this is coming from DevSkim, but there were other things. Oh yeah, it's in here. So here we are. So this is really coming from the security IntelliSense, as you can see, specifically for Azure. It will analyze it, and you can even have quick fixes here. So same way, so you don't have to make any compromises in whatever tool you're using. So use this. This is a free tool. Use this. Even DevSkim is a free tool. This is more on the analyzer on any kind of level of coding, but combine these two and you will get a safe way of coding for the cloud. So again, another cool tip to start managing your code. So I can close this one up. Good. Now, even on the level of your code itself, you need to make sure that you set up your coding infrastructure. So that's not only your Visual Studio or your IDE like Rider or whatever in a safe way. You also need to set up your environment where your repositories lie and your build pipelines and such as a secure thing. So the element of the principle of least privilege should be applied even to developers. So if you don't need access to any core components of your application, stay away from it and make sure that you do decent administration on top of that. This sounds reasonably straightforward, but still a lot of organizations don't do that. And this gives, if you don't do that, you can actually involve a lot of things and avoid a lot of things in the SecOps part of the secure development lifecycle. You can fiddle around with static security analysis. You can fiddle around with dynamic security. You can interact on any kind of these tests, so you can really make sure that your code, the malicious code that you want to inject, can be bypassed. Now, for that, in Azure DevOps, there's another free tool that you can download as an extension, which is called the ADO scanner. Now, the ADO scanner will actually validate the way you set up your Azure DevOps environment. Now, the cool thing about this is a build step that you need to do in a pipeline. So just build up a pipeline which has two simple steps. Let me just go to, where's my browser? Is this one? Yeah, it's this one. So here we have our dashboard. As you can see, we can take a look at what the organization scan result is like. I have 11 failed controls. It's normal. This is for demo purposes. You should work on better ways of doing things. But like, for instance, do not enable access for external users. Justify all guest identities that have been granted access to your organization. I have passed here. And you find all the information back here in a very nice way. And every single build, you can reiterate and check your security of your pipelines and the way you set up your environment. This is one thing of checking. So this is really for the builds and the releases. But there's also a widget specifically for the sanity of your organization, your project, and your build release artifacts. So this is another widget that we have, which does build scan results, which does connection scan results where there's secrets in there, and so on and so on. So these are all the things that you can actually scan. Even your agents can be scanned for malicious activity or bad practices. So this is, again, something that comes for free that can help you onboard in a safer way as a developer and as a DevOps organization. Okay, did anybody hear about this one already?
No, this is a new one on me.
Okay, so if you have comments on this one, feel free, put it in the chat. I'll try to respond as soon as possible. All right. Are you all still awake? Because that's the downside of doing things virtual, right? I have no idea whether people are still awake. So no. So if you have comments, please. Yeah, still here. All right, goody. Stay with me. Bear with. All right. So let's go over to the secure building part, and this is actually the best part because this is where we get to shine all the fancy tools. Now, secure building can be easy. The only downside that you have is you have a plethora of choices and where will I use where. And there's a lot of free tools and there's a lot of paying tools. Now, I just summed up a couple of them here, but it's only a part of them. Most of these tools that you see here can actually work in both GitHub, Azure DevOps, but also Jenkins and stuff are supported with most of these tools. Every reasonable security static analysis tool, because typically these are static analysis tools, except for OWASP ZapScan. That's a DAS tool, so that's a dynamic analysis tool. They have a plugin for any kind of application lifecycle management tooling. Now, I'm going to show you a couple that are free that you can set up easily and that you get a lot of positive response of immediately. But do know that if you're implementing something like that, start light and start looking at what you need, but also make sure that you then act to the things that come out of it. Now, the first thing that I'm going to show you is unfortunately something that this is going to be deprecated by Microsoft by the end of the summer. It's called the Azure Secure DevOps Toolkit. Now, the cool thing about the Azure Secure DevOps Toolkit is it is something that we built internally that we've been using for the last 8 years on our internal TFS environment, and where we deployed Azure with. So we did validate checks, whether we did secure deployments inside of Azure and making sure that every deployment that we had were by the standards that we had handoff. Now, the cool thing about it is that this can work as a plugin inside of AZDO, but it can also work as a standalone tool. And it has some very nice things like Power BI dashboard that you can set up. And most of the tooling is now already coming back into Azure Security Center. There's going to be a past deployment test 2, which is a new phase in AZSK, which is going to be the replacement for the toolings that we have today. So we will not continue developing on this thing, and it will be archived by the end of summer, but you can still use it if you want to use it. Now, the cool thing, I'm just going to demonstrate to you anyway, is that you can actually use this to validate your ARM templates. And the validation of ARM templates is very important because a lot of things can go wrong. So here I have my terminal, and I already have a couple of setups here for a couple of ARM templates. So if I do, you can see that there's a couple of ARM templates here. So what I can do is I can actually get the ARM template security status from one of these ARM templates. So this is the ARM template deployment. So if I run this PowerShell command, it will actually validate against the best practices of ARM development. Now, the cool thing is you see these little tables here where how many total high, failed, and verified resources there are and what should happen. Now, this will bring out a new folder, and in that folder you will have, as you can see here, you will have a structure with a CSV file and a PowerShell output. Now, the CSV file can then be used in Excel to use as a mitigation list and a checklist of the things that you need to improve. Now, it doesn't only work on the ARM template, you can also use this on top of your entire subscription to see how good you're working with it. So I already had my subscription ID added to a variable here. I'm just going to quickly run this get AZ subscription security status. And if I run this will actually do a full check of my subscription of the ARM code behind it. So if you ever were going to export that ARM template fully, you can at least see what you need to address and what you need to optimize. And if it's something that you've created already in code, you can still use this output to see whether you need to change your ARM template there. So again, this will generate a CSV file. And if you then take a look at the content of the CSV file, I already did this earlier because it can take a while, you get whether the state is passed, yes or no. So I can just say here, error and failed. And I can do OK. And as you can see, there's a lot of issues going on. Do not grant permission. So you get all these best practices, whether you need to set policies and so on and so on. So there's a lot of things that it will actually check. You get the full result checking here what it is checking for. There's a new version just came out, but they're gonna, as I said, it's going to be deprecated at the end of the summer. There's another thing that you can do to validate your ARM templates during your build pipeline, which is ARM TTK. It's also a PowerShell thing, and this will validate best practices also and the versioning of your ARM APIs. So if you run that one, I'm going to show you this. So I have here also a template. If I do a test AZ template, which is part of the ARM TTK module, this will test it against what kind of API you're using, how you set up your dependencies, the weak links in there, should you be updating some of these things. And some of these things are actually also related to security. As you can see, if you're using an older API and you don't know that some things have changed, you might have implemented a CVE. Do these tools also work best when used alongside something like Cloud Adoption Framework? Yes, because CAF also just implements a couple of ARM templates which do landing zones. So yeah, you can actually use these alongside with CAF. Yeah. CAF is also a set of best practices when it comes down to organization. It's not only deployment. It's also on organization and management and governance. Yeah, but that's actually a good question. So thank you. I hope that answer was satisfying, by the way. Okay, so next part. Let's go really into some really statical analysis. Let's talk a little bit about some free tools, other free tools from not Microsoft. First of all, there's White Source Bolt. And why would you use something like White Source Bolt? Well, first of all, White Source as an offering. It has a free offering, which you can cheaply implement inside of AZDO or GitHub. And even Jenkins has support, don't worry about it. And what it does, at first, it scans for licenses that you're trying to avoid. Sometimes developers just plug in a DLL which needs a license for, or it goes without the correct MIT license or whatever license if you're using open source. Yeah? That's the first thing. But it also checks for CVEs, so vulnerabilities that have been checked in. And which are available in a global database for security risks. Yeah. Most of the security vendors are using that CVE database to find vulnerabilities inside of code or inside of packages. So NPM, NuGet packages, and all these things, they need to be scanned against these CVEs. Now, White Source has this in two flavors, in a full paying service, and it's totally something different than what we have with White Source Bolt. White Source Bolt integrates very nicely inside of your CI/CD and your repository. I'll show you in just a second. And then just implements it there without too many hassle. White Source itself is a plugin that you need to link into, and then you get a different portal with a lot more capabilities at your disposal. So I'm just going to show you White Source Bolt. I can show you the other one too, which has additional things. So I have here the a build. Which one is it? That's always a downside. I always keep forgetting where I put it. Yeah, let's take this one, for instance. Does this have White Source implement? Yeah, this has White Source Bolt implement, as you can see. So I have my pipeline here. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, here it is. So this is a run of a build, and at the end of the build, you will get a report integrated inside of the build report. So this will give the results back on how safe your code is, how many high vulnerable packages there are, and what you need to do immediately as a top fix. You also get some where there's outdated code, how the severity distribution is, and you get a lot of info back on this thing. We also have a full reporting here on the sideline integrated as an additional app, where you can take a look at all the differences between the previous builds. So you can have a full overview here, and you have a full export report, and it will be pushed back from after the build. Okay, so if we take a look at the full version, I'm quickly going to show you. This is a full dashboard, and you can set dashboards, but you can also set products, and these products can then be built, and there can be any kind of your applications inside of your organization. You get also the same vulnerability libraries. You also get license distribution, how the weight is being pushed over, but you get an additional set of reporting along with it, where there's high severity bugs involved, where you want to get alerts on those, and that can automate the entire thing. So there's a lot of things additionally coming up with White Source as a tooling. So keep that in mind. But Bolt is free and fairly easy to implement. Even in GitHub, it works like a charm. It works a little bit different because here for every where is it? This one? No, it's not this one. That we forgot where I put it. No, this one. Here we go. So every build that you do, it will generate an issue per found vulnerability that it has. So here you can see there's an issue created here. And this is coming from, as you can see, from White Source Bolt, as you can see. And if you open this one, you actually get a full explanation of what the vulnerability is, very detailed, just like in AZDO, but it's now an issue, and they can be handled in what we call projects inside of GitHub. And there you can handle them, and you can put them inside of the frames, the swim lanes, and handle them like that. But you need a little bit more management on top of that. Okay, so this is for white source boards. And then one of my favorite tools of the entire world, Snyk.io. Snyk is a security company which takes itself very seriously, and they've been boosting the last couple of years. Now, the cool thing is they also have the same things as white source, like the vulnerability package scanning, but it does a little bit more than that. It even has IAC scanning. So based upon Kubernetes Helm charts or things like Terraform, it can scan for weak references in infrastructure as code. It also can be easily implemented inside of your DevOps pipeline. As you can see here, where is it again? Here we are. And it will give out a report inside of AZDO. So this is, give it a second. Normally it just will run. Should be loading. Come on. Try it again. Yeah, you're right. Now it's loading. Should be loading. Come on. Why aren't you loading? It shouldn't take that long. Here we go. Now it is loading. Here we are. So this gives all the feedback back on the NPM packages that you have, the weaknesses that are in there. So a little bit like the other stuff. But the cool thing is that you have a very nice dashboard, and the integrations are wild because it can scan containers, it can scan your code, it can scan your container registries, it can scan your images. It does a lot of things that it can integrate with. It has continuous integration for all the major brands, ranging from TeamCity to Azure Pipelines to Jenkins. But even in the IDE, there's a vulnerability cost IDE for Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, and they come for free, these plugins, and you can easily implement them. And it's a CLI available too. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that can go on here. And even from a reporting stance, you get a nice graph, the issues that are being generated, dependency issues that are being generated, and so on and so on. So pretty cool tool, free for most of the things. It comes with a lot of free build minutes. Try to use it and try to learn a little bit from it. And they really do an awesome job. And they have a cool logo too. Now, one of the most widely used, in my eyes, tools is SonarQube. And SonarQube even has a lot of investment made the last 3 versions in security. They already had some OWASP top 10 inclusion. So OWASP top 10 are the core rules everybody is avoiding or neglecting. It's like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, all these things. That's the top, the OWASP top 10, and that also comes in SonarQube. I'm running my SonarQube inside of Azure App Services natively, but if you don't want to run it natively, you can even run it. Okay, that was weird. You can even run it as a Sonar Cloud, which is a hosted model. It only can run up for free in open source up to 1 million lines of code, but you can already have a good idea of what's going on with your code. As you can see, it's public repositories. But I'm running mine as a hosted thing in app services. The cool thing is that you have, if you take a look at your code, you get your quality gate. So it does more than just security, but it also has, if you take a look at the overall code, it has what we call security hotspots. And these are, it's willing to load, here we are. These are giving you things like, we find here hard-coded credentials, we find CVEs that are at risk here, we have all these things that have been recognized. There's denial of service, there's code injection, there's weak cryptography, all the things that it can manage. The cool thing is that you can add your own, because this is based on all the analyzers that you're running with your code, like FXCOP and all these things. So you can just implement these as a plugin, and it even has some cool visualizations. If you want to take a look at a 3D version of your code, you can even have a 3D view the way your code is working. So maybe it's something Martyn can start implementing too in his next call. I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. There's security and code analysis. That was a thing that was said as a paying thing. If you are a premier customer, you get this for free. Elsewhere, you need to become a premier customer and then you get it. So it's always paying that you have, and this gives you a lot of tools inside of your pipeline, as you can see here. Yeah, it's this one. Here we go. So it has all these little steps here. It even generates an artifact, which is a security analysis report, which combines all the previous scans of anything that you implemented. And there's a lot more than you can see here. But this will bring back a full report, something like this, that you can then implement again with a little CSS. Maybe you can see all the vulnerabilities or all the things that are being tweaked inside of your code can be handled then from there out. Okay, so that's something that you can use. Now, the last phase of our secure DevOps story is the deployment phase. Now, when we're doing Azure, I said it before, always try to keep the principle of least privilege. Even for deployment, that should count. So try to work with roles that can do deployments that have the least privilege. So only do deployments in app services if you have an app service role and don't have a global admin role, for instance. Use management groups and try to use RBAC at its best. Yeah. You need to create a governance plan, and these governance plans, they can be best made by using something we call policies and blueprints. So blueprints can consist out of templates, which you can check off with all the tools that I mentioned earlier. You can have RBAC on top of these blueprints and on top of your ARM templates, and you can set policies where you can deploy something like that, or you can't deploy something like that, or you can delete something like that, or you can't access those resources. So all these things combined will give you a governance mantle, but it also gives you security, because locking down your infrastructure and avoidance of tampering is one of the key security features that you need to implement when you're doing Azure governance and Azure management, Azure subscription management. Okay, so I'll leave the next slides, I'll leave them for your reading. I'll provide the slides after this, but as you can see, it consists out of ARM templates, definition, and custom scripts, and this is just a walkthrough. Bringing it back to that one thing that everybody keeps forgetting, or at least in my eyes where I visit, is the monitoring part when we're talking about DevOps. Monitoring is the thing that has such an impact, because it brings you back your issue management, your problem management. If you take a look from it from a stance of ITIL or Probit, if you're implementing those kinds of practices inside of the design of your solution, and back to the deployment of your solution, because monitoring can be used on so many levels. Now, one thing that we do have in Azure is a tool that can help you monitor when you do pre-deployment phases, specifically when we talk about containers. Today, we do a lot of container deployments, and typically we start off with a registry. And one of the things that we have in Azure is Security Center, Azure Defender. And today we have Azure Defender, and just need to open the correct browser window. Security Center has Defender for containers on Kubernetes, registries, and instances. And it's specifically the registry thing that is interesting, because what this thing does, you can either get it through Azure Defender, or you can go through inventory, which is also a way of going there. But Defender is the easiest one. So you can see here container image scanning. If you click on that one, you will actually get all the issues that have been found inside of container images that you pushed from your CI/CD pipeline, and that still have weaknesses in the underlying operating system inside of the container. So we can do scanning with Aqua and with what's the other one, Twistlock, for instance, inside of our CI/CD pipeline. But what if something really goes wrong and we don't have any knowledge of that? We still have container registry scanning available if you enable it. And as you can see here, this scans for all the images that I have. And as you can see here, I have here, for instance, a privilege escalation vulnerability for Debian. So I need to update my base image of my container to make sure that this doesn't expose any weaknesses or vulnerabilities that I as a hacker can exploit and gain access to my entire Kubernetes cluster, for instance, because containers by default are leaky. So you get some remediation steps. You even get some affected sources, as you can see here. You get a good overview, and you can even do. Sometimes you even can follow this through in Sentinel, for instance, if there is already something which is impacted. Now, that was about I have all the ways how it works and some additional information on these slides. There's just one more thing that I want to talk to you about is the GitHub implementation of secure scanning. We also have GitHub Today, which has a implementation on scanning, as you can see here in the security parts of a GitHub repository. We call it code scanning. Code scanning also does happen on a repository level every single time you do a check-in. Now, CodeQL is something we bought 2 years ago. It's was SAML name before, and you can easily implement this by going up and setting up a code scanning tool. There's already a good set of actions available from many providers, and some of them are for free. But unfortunately, you need to buy this feature. I want to see it differently, but yeah. And what this does is it implements an action. And this action then will be triggered by means of whatever trigger you have. And this will then, under the hood, will do a full scan. As you can see, it will do you can have it in a full flow if you want to. And this job, what it does under the hood, it will analyze, in this case, JavaScript. And it's the CodeQL is actually a little bit like SQL language, and it will do a query against a database with QL files, and that database is being consisted inside of your code. So this is where we can scan against and where we do the querying against. So that's the last thing that I want to say about scanning. I'm at the end of my talk. I have a lot of resources in here that can be useful for you, whether it's for you reading, whether it's information about Key Vault, whether it's information about setting up a Ensono cube, whether it's information about white source. Also, the one thing that I didn't show you was dynamic tools. There's a lot of free tools here too, but most of the tools are paying. The two free tools that you can use is OAuth scanning tool, and you can run that actually in a container too, and run your pipeline after deployment against it. So that way you can do a pre-check before you go live with it. And Port Trigger is also something which you can run the Burp Suite Community Edition, which you can start using also to scan your information. Okay, so with that being said, I'm at the end of my presentation. And I do hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something about it. Again, my goal is not to be a commercial vehicle for all these tools. It's more of creating an awareness against people who are impacted by DevOps. As a developer operations guy, typically the operations people know a little bit more about security because a typical developer organization sees security as at the network perspective and as a privilege perspective, and not really as a code perspective. So I do hope that you take this away tonight and that you start looking at some of these tools and maybe start implementing a safer way of building code. I thank you for your attention.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mike. That was brilliant.
Yeah, I'm sorry I went a little bit over time.
It's okay. Does anybody have any more questions for Mike before we head into a brief break? Obviously, feel free to unmute yourselves to ask,
Yeah.
or pop them in the chat, whichever is easiest for you.
I had the impression people found it really interesting. So.
Yeah, I didn't know the security intelligence is a new one on me, which is really, really good to see. I do a lot of work. So for me, by profession, I'm a DevOps consultant and cloud solutions architect as well. And I use a lot of Trivy and Terrascan to do vulnerability scanning there and compliance. But there's a couple of tools in there that'd be really handy to also catch it just in case those tools don't, because not every one single tool will catch everything, right?
There's a couple of them that do a lot more, but typically you need to combine. Yeah, indeed. And there's even stupid tools that you use every day that also have these things. Like Terraform has a scanning method on side of Terraform assets. NuGet has a security audit part. NPM has an audit part that you can use. So you can start already light with the tools that you already need to implement. So yeah, but indeed, you need to have multiple tools, especially the reporting part is the hardest part. So, and Michael, don't worry about it. I don't know as much about other stuff. So this is just a passion that I try to evangelize to people. And I have this discussion a lot with my ISVs. And again, you don't want to become a company that builds weak software that gets deployed everywhere. And I'm not saying that is because I know SolarWinds. I find it so hard for them that they were in this pickle. And especially that JetBrains was involved with this, and that was smeared out in the press. I don't know whether you see the NYC, the New York Times article that this obscure company called JetBrains, unfortunately, because they don't deserve that much. I mean, they do have decent tools, but unfortunately, the hackers got access to TeamCity, and that has nothing to do with that TeamCity is a bad tool. On the contrary, it's a decent tool, and for crying out loud, it's a tool that really has some good mileage and some good credit deserved there. So my heart goes out to the JetBrains people.
Well, Mike, thank you very much for that. So let's go into a quick break. So let's take 5 minutes now, and then we'll resume with Martyn with his talk on achieving your DevOps goals at 5 past the hour. If that works for everybody.
Okay.
What have you got a link, Mike, to where you're going to put your slides?
Yeah, I'm going to quickly put the slides. Since I already did it, I'm just going to copy the previous one. It's the same. It's the same deck anyway, so that doesn't matter. Let me just quickly give it to you. Joe, put it in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I I was trying to. There was a couple in there that I was trying to quickly scribble down the links for, and then we'd moved on.
No. It's, so all the links should be working, or quick links. So I didn't put the PPT. I just put them in the PDF, but that works as well. So I'm just going to quickly do the share here. Give you a link. I'm going to copy it. Come on. And then I can put my kid to bed and now I'm coming back because I really want to see Martyn's thing too.
Cool.
There we go. There we go. I'm gonna put this in the chat. Voila. There you have it. You immediately have all the links. I'll be right back. Yeah, so that's
And don't forget, folks, whilst you're in the break, there is our JetBrains license giveaway. All you need to do, like I mentioned at the start, is tweet with the hashtag DevOps and then what we'll do, say it won't be today because our prize draw thing is broken. We just need to fix that. But it should be sold by within the next couple of days, actually. And we'll DM you that prize if you win. We'll DM you that prize on Twitter, and that'll give you 12 months of the latest version of whatever product you pick. I won one recently at another meetup, and I got Goland. And when that license expires, you can choose to either renew it yourself, or you will also get a perpetual license for a prior version of what you redeem it against. So that could be ReSharper, it could be Rider, WebStorm, etc. So
Rider is awesome.
I really like Rider. I find that actually most of the when I do get to write any code these days, I just end up doing it in Visual Studio Code.
A lot of people do, but Rider has some really cool stuff. I mean, I know Martyn very well. He is the dev advocate for Rider at JetBrains, and sometimes we just talk about how he does the integrations for Azure and all these things. So I get to see some of the stuff there that is demonstrating on regular basis the things that they're doing. Unfortunately, I cannot really use it, but sometimes I demonstrate it because I want to show cloud native stuff, and they really have good things like IntelliJ, which is so good for when you do in Java. And the integration with Azure is for me the most important thing, because I preach Azure all over the place. And yeah, the things that they're doing is really cool. So yeah,
I really like their, I can't remember what it's called, but when I used to write a lot of Python, I used to use their Python IDE all the time.
PyCharm, yeah. And but it's also very cool is Data Grip.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you should take a look at it.
That's another one that I need to play with.
Yeah, and what I specifically like is the way they make their tools accessible. They have this little toolbox thing where you can manage all your riders, where you can manage all your JetBrains licenses. So it just runs in your system tray. It's sweet. I mean, cool stuff. Cool.
Martyn will be joining us again in a second. He's just restarting his Zoom because it's not very happy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've taken so much time of him. I hope it's cool. Okay.
It's I mean the DevSecOps, especially the tooling. It's such a wide subject as well. It's hard not to try and cover as much as you can to get the awareness out as well.
Exactly, and I want to show some things that are can be really useful. And then yeah, it all comes together in the end. So there was a little bit the setup of my session when I started creating it. It's like timeless because everybody can implement these things. And so if you have any tips for me that things that I should add to it, feel free. I'm always open for improvement on these things. But I think I already put in a lot of stuff. So
yeah, I think that it covers pretty much everything that I could think of. I guess there's I guess it'd be more of a deeper dive as a separate topic, but where you've got like Azure Sentinel.
But Sentinel is a dangerous product, meaning you can go anyway with Sentinel. Sentinel is first of all a seam and a sword, but you can also just use it for as a big data tool. And I spent a lot of time last year in Sentinel. I work closely with the entire security PG. So people like Yuri Georgianis and Nicolas Nicola. Yeah, I even so this book. I don't know where you can see it. This version 1 and version 2, I did the technical editing. I did the technical editing for AZ500. I did the technical editing for a new book that Nicolas is writing for the moment. So that's also very cool. Look out for if you're looking for security stuff. Unfortunately, the Sentinel one I didn't do because that came out to Martyn Coupland, of course, because he's the guy that is actually driving all the MVP stuff when it comes down to Sentinel. But Sentinel is really it's a very complex product that you can go everywhere with it, but you can indeed use the KQL behind it to push that back inside, let's say, as a gated feature inside of Azure DevOps, for instance. So you can do a lot of more stuff with it. But Do you need it for gating? Not quite, because you can already do a lot of stuff with just plain log analytics and use a KQL from that one and use the security readings out of that. For instance, if you have alerts or things that are coming along with it. So if you, of course, have things like Security Center enabled, because that's the first thing that you need to do. You need to enable Security Center for most of the security features. And Sentinel is only reporting on everything which is coming back and analyzing and putting some machine learning on top of it as a lateral movement tool. So that's the complex part of it. So yeah, it's a beast, but it's a very cool thing. So does it fit here? Kind of, but that's more on the operations part where you have already a breach or things happening. But yep, there's that.
Oh, cool. Thank you, Mike. That's really really good. Well, folks, we are just at almost at just over the 5 minutes past the hour mark. So I'm going to hand over to a DevOps Knots alum in Martyn, who is going to be giving his talk on achieving your DevOps goals. So welcome back, Martyn.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Liam. Thanks for having me again. Much appreciated. I'm actually going to leave my camera off because Zoom seems to be having numerous hissy fits tonight around bandwidth. So we'll try and keep it as stable as possible by leaving that off. So you know, kind of following on from a little bit in some ways from what Mike was talking about. We're going to be talking about once you're in a good place with DevOps, and that could be anything, to be honest. That could be security, it could be culture within your organization, it could be our processes, it could be our team structure, anything really. It doesn't really matter. But one of the biggest gaps that I generally see in organizations that I go to is around where some work has been done to implement DevOps, and then they lose focus because they're not quite sure how to measure success, or they're not quite sure how to maintain the momentum that they've started. And that's something that I see all the time, and I suspect a few of you will be able to resonate with that in a number of different ways, and we'll certainly have some experience of being on the end of that where it has started to go wrong, or where there has started to be issues within your organization. So let's get going. So just a quick little bit about me. Some of you all know from the last time I presented towards the end of last year. So I'm a principal solution architect up with Ensono. As already been mentioned, I'm also a Microsoft MVP in Azure as well. My general work is around Azure as a platform, cloud native and serverless, as well as DevOps transformation. Those two go together very, very nicely as it happens. I do quite a lot of speaking, user groups, and also conferences as well, blogging. I already have one book out on an unrelated topic, still technical, but I have one in progress at the minute on DevOps, so hopefully that should be out later this year. And I'm also an ambassador with a DevOps Institute as well. So just to start off, I want to talk about what the foundations to DevOps success are. I think it's really important that we set some groundwork really for the rest of the session, the presentation, around what we would consider foundations to be successful in DevOps, what really needs to be in place. There's a number of different things. So I think the first thing is around leadership support. So I spend a lot of time talking to clients that I work with, saying that for DevOps to be successful, you really have to be in a situation where your leadership will support your decisions and your leadership will support what you are doing with the team. And that support has to come from the top down. It's no good it really coming from the bottom up. It needs to be from your team on the ground, and it needs to be really filtered down all the way from an executive level. So when we say leadership, we're not just talking team leadership, I'm talking from an executive level within your organization. It's something that's really important. And where leadership do not understand what the value of DevOps is to your organization is where you actually start to come a cropper in that and come and get up against some issues. So explaining to leadership why you are doing it in a non-technical way. They don't really care what DevOps is, but talking to them about business drivers for doing this, making our time to market faster, increasing stability, ultimately increasing customer satisfaction and revenue. All of those things are all things that are going to be music to the ears of leadership teams. Next one is around product management. This is really around service and product ownership. So for me, a key characteristic of any agile or DevOps approach is that it's customer orientation and it is oriented towards the customer. So in order to be able to facilitate that transition culturally, you have to focus on customer value. The organization should evolve to accommodate new ownership roles. And product and service owners really head that collation and prioritization of the requirements of your backlog. They are able to support the delivery of business value along the entire process that you are going through. There is also as well there to make sure that they provide oversight and ensuring you have continuous focus on value communication of all of those priorities to all contributors and stakeholders. So therefore, creating product or service owner roles within the organization, enabling them to carry out their mission and their goal is a really crucial factor when it comes to the success of DevOps. And that enablement means both empowering those new roles with the rights and responsibilities and also measuring their performances tied to KPIs that align to customer satisfaction. So the next one is around cross-functional teams. So breaking down silos is really the backbone of any DevOps approach. If you ask a lot of organizations why they are doing DevOps, they will talk about cross-functional teams and breaking down silos. So the way practitioners will get there is by setting up multi-skilled teams. They will include certain stakeholders involved in development support of your service or product. And those cross-departmental teams or cross-functional teams will boost the collaboration and efficiency. They'll enable greater open communication along team members. Not only does that start to reduce any waiting time and ambiguity that results from having to work together with someone in another siloed organization or team, it enables the team to learn from each other. Sharing that knowledge leads to the development of better services and products over time. Next one, it directly does lead into what Mike was talking about there, is around using DevSecOps to bolster your security. I actually really don't like the term DevSecOps. I really think it should be pretty obvious now that we should be doing security as a fundamental thing in technology. Hackers and people wanting to do bad things to our products and organizations has been around long enough that we shouldn't really exclude it in any way. But what I think it does do is bring the focus back into yes, when we are in a DevOps world, we still should be thinking of security at the forefront of that. And one of the things that I do like that has happened because of DevSecOps is really the notion that you can bring security into that DevOps world, work with them much more closely, start to shift left a lot of responsibility, a lot further down the chain overall. But when it comes to having super high velocity agile environments, the creation of any new fancy feature is a high priority. And that can be at the expense of security and robustness considerations. And that's where security comes into it in DevSecOps for me. So DevOps can obviously serve to remediate simply by connecting Dev and Ops together. There's more that you can do to improve your product design from early engineering phases. And that's where DevSecOps helps. It'll help you bake in security aspects into the process of product delivery. As I said, around shifting left in the life cycle, you can uncover and fix issues a lot earlier, achieve better continuous improvement around product security. You can standardize the use of mature processes aligned to security as well. So there's a huge amount of benefits. And if you're doing DevOps, but you're not doing DevSecOps yet, I would definitely say that is one of the next places you need to be looking is introducing some of those security teams into what it is that you're doing. Next is around automation. So thinking back to the Agile Manifesto, it explicitly favors and talks about individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to need tools at all, or you won't need tools at all. Having the right tools will greatly simplify certain processes and certain activities, and can thus help reduce errors, can reduce development time, and ultimately reduce cost as well. In fact, successful DevOps teams are very reliant on a number of technologies, a number of different software platforms for anything from version control, config management, build, monitoring, and so on and so forth. There's hundreds of tools. Automation is an all-round keyword when it comes to DevOps. And continuous integration, continuous deployment, obviously continuous delivery when we refer to those two terms together, they're achievable mainly through automation strategy. Now, it's important that your processes are right first. So my mantra really talking to clients is, it is no good having a process and just taking that process and automating it, because all you are then enabling to do potentially is make a bad process happen more quickly. By applying process improvements to that first and getting that process afterwards, the process afterwards means that you are able to do that process in an automated fashion, but it is much more efficient and it works a lot better than it would do previously. So when it comes to ensuring high product quality, DevOps involves a huge amount of testing, but testing means a ton of work that can be spent innovating new features instead. And this is often the balance that people try and make. So that's why DevOps teams will strive to automate testing as much as possible in their strive towards continuous delivery. And this is really where a lot of that comes in. And then finally, around monitoring and KPIs. So DevOps is all around continuous learning and continuous improvement. And it's really a constant effort to uncover and solve problems around the whole life cycle, not just one particular part. So monitoring is therefore really of vital importance as far as I'm concerned, both in terms of releasing the product, but ensuring oversight of the development process. So in order to be successful at DevOps, you're going to need to be building out a metric system to keep an eye on, analyze process flow, velocity, team, and in some cases, individual performance. You will need to be defining KPIs that measure DevOps goals like escape defects or cycle time, and use those metrics to drive performance improvement, further ultimately. So what I want to talk about is the circle of DevOps adoption, and this is a 3-step process really, which is assess, transform, and review. And what this fundamentally means is we go through a process of assessing our environment, figuring out exactly what it is that we want to do and where we want to be doing it. Then we go through a transform phase, which is where we get better at what we're doing. And then we take a step back and we review where we are. And the output of that review allows us to then assess further, transform, and then review again, basically. It's a weak success is what I've heard some people call it as well. So for this, I think there's around 7 steps to success. So the first one, step 1, is around your challenges and any gap analysis. So it's important to recognize you have a problem. Bottlenecks are not necessarily stoppers, that they're signs for us to improve. So you can identify problems, you can identify bottlenecks, tedious processes, using techniques such as value stream mapping, capability, gap analysis. You can do workshops, surveys, deep dive sessions, all of these things. But they're not just one-time activities. You do need to keep returning to those exercises every 6 months or so to ensure that your DevOps movement is on the right track. And this is where people fall down. People generally do those things once and they won't do them again. And this is where people start to fall off a cliff face in terms of their plans, and things start to go by the wayside. Step 2 is around DevOps goals and maturity model. So now you know what the problem is, you can start to figure out how to solve that problem. Copying others won't work. Okay, so I've actually been to 3 organizations since the turn of 2021 who've tried to implement the Spotify scaled agile model. Fundamentally, unless you are a music streaming service that is based in Sweden with numerous teams all over the world, that model is not going to work for you. Right? You can take aspects of that model and aspects of other models and make them work for your organization. Directly copying is not going to help. So you need to analyze the situation and the available resources to you. You then need to identify goals which have a high weightage and things that can be achieved in a short span. Typically, high-level goals need to be broken down into smaller pockets and prioritized on a need basis. So enabling that change agility using automation techniques and automation tools can help reduce cycle time, provide rapid feedback, and that's where you can start to look at things like continuous integration and deployment. But based on analysis, you can design a maturity model for your organization. There's quite a lot of reference models available. One in particular on continuous delivery is quite popular. A lot of people have probably seen it. It's one by Jez Humble and Dave Farley. Obviously, Dave Farley's one of the father figures of the CD and CI movement, so it's definitely worth a read. You can use one as a base, and then you can refine it with inputs from your analysis. So that way, the desired state for DevOps within your organization is more aligned to real bottlenecks rather than you just pulling things out of the air and trying to resolve problems that you potentially don't know even exist. Step 3 is around roadmap and transition plan. So now you know what needs to be accomplished. It's also equally important to put together a roadmap and any key milestones. Right? There are placeholders to help us revisit our goals and make sure that we're on the right track. We need to start and take a step back and look at where we are in that process and make any adjustments along the way. Obviously, one of the key things of Agile, doing anything like this is actually no different at all. You still need to be working in an iterative fashion whenever you are working to improve what you are doing, and this is really no different. Next is really around step 4, which is around architecture and tooling and the landscape that surrounds those two areas. So at this stage, it's really important to remind ourselves that running behind fancy sets of tools and automation will not make us a DevOps organization. Right? DevOps is the fuel towards lean IT, which is constantly evolving. Right? Designing the right blend of DevOps strategies helps you achieve your desired speed overall. The level of automation with tooling is directly proportional to the need of the organization. Don't just follow the latest techniques that other companies are doing. Think if they're going to add value to your organization. Everything should be around adding value. Before working on your dev architecture, study your organized application stack. How many of them support microservices? How do you get legacy monolithic products to be more modernized? Always follow architecture principles such as layering, isolation, keep it simple, group-related functions, encapsulation, so on and so forth. This helps address architecture concerns around stability, performance, recoverability, security, availability, and maintainability as well. Those are all key pillars within architecture. Step 5 is around your DevOps working model and the transition plan around there. So considering that architecture design and the tools, start building the capabilities in pockets. Quick wins, such as automated build, deployment should be first in queue, version controlling your code, branching strategies. They can help you realize value and benefits within no time. So step 6 is around your metrics and your measures. So this is where it starts to get in a lot more important. So now you've implemented elements of DevOps, has it actually helped you improve and gain speed? It's important to measure the value you deliver by including all of this automation and all of this change within your organization. Metrics are your means to deliver the business value to the client. You need to determine the minimum number of metrics you need to provide the information necessary to meet the business goals. Metrics help us see and reflect on our work and accordingly identify areas of improvement. I think historically metrics have gotten a pretty bad name for themselves because they can be used to reduce headcount, reduce budget. but not in a DevOps model. It's all around making it better and improving what we're doing. So finally, it's around DevOps culture and how do we keep evolving? Right? A common question is, how can we drive DevOps culture? My answer is that first we need to understand what the DevOps culture means. Fostering a DevOps culture is around collaboration between your teams. It's around cohesive teams with shared objectives, lean principles and continuous delivery of value, and much, much more. We need to start embracing setbacks, have systems-based thinking, recover automatically, experiment without regret, continuously improve, but at all times be customer-centric. And in any organization, that cultural change has to be driven from upside down. It needs to be cascaded from higher management to the development teams and to the operational teams. All the above steps we discussed start feeding a healthy DevOps culture overall. Okay, so moving on. Next is around assessment. And this is really around making sure that once we've gone through those 7 steps and once we start doing an assessment, when we do our assessment, we need to understand what the business goals are. Okay, it's no good us going off as technology teams and coming up with our own goals that are completely different to what the business is trying to achieve. We need to understand what the business goals are. We need to understand how technology is going to help the business achieve those goals. Make use of the team topologies that are published on the internet as well and now very commonplace. You need to also feed in previous learnings. It's all around continuous improvement. You need to identify early parts of the tool chain as well. Don't leave the tool chain till last. Even though the tool chain is less important than the cultural, the people and the process aspects of DevOps, don't forget about them and certainly don't leave them till the last minute. We also need to start asking ourselves questions as well. Like, how well do we actually know our product? Right? It's okay developers working on products, but they may work on specific parts of a product and never really see the bigger picture. That's a cultural anti-pattern within DevOps. We need to be able to see the bigger picture all the time. And fundamentally, we need to be able to understand exactly what success looks like. And that's something that is really, really important. So next is around transform. So transform is really around taking everything that we've learned from that assess phase, and transform is really about taking all of those learnings and changing what we are doing. So during transformation, it's really, really important to support your stakeholders and your staff on that journey. Right, so through every step of this, not just the initial journey towards DevOps, but all of the steps that happen after that, it's really, really important to make sure that staff are happy and comfortable with what is happening and make sure that they understand what is happening and why it is happening. You need to start planning incrementally, right? Exactly the same as how we deliver our products and how we deliver our software. Any of these changes must also be planned incrementally. They need to be prioritized, as we were saying, towards the resolution of bottlenecks. Those are your quick wins, those that make things better within your organization. Also, as well, is that ability to scale up to achieve business goals. Right, scaling up and scaling is one of the biggest challenges, I think, when it comes to organizations and their adoption of anything really, especially DevOps. If you suddenly need to go from 10 engineers to 20 engineers, how are you going to do that? How are your processes going to scale? How are your tools going to scale? These are all things that you need to be thinking of. And this would be a wave of transformation that your organization would need to go through as well. Looking for meaningful wins, right? And this may seem obvious, but I go to lots of organizations where they work on continuous improvement and continuous feedback programs, and they work on output which doesn't really have anything meaningful behind it. Ultimately, yes, it will make a very small difference, but look for things that are meaningful, that actually add value. And it's that word value. And it's so important when it comes to DevOps, is making sure that you are always adding value to what you are delivering, whether that's through improving internal processes or whether that's improving what you deliver through your product. And then, of course, underlining all of this as well is wherever possible, we need to be strengthening our safeguards and strengthening our security as well. It's really important that we always look at what is happening from a security perspective. Tools like the threat modeling tool that Mike was showing are really, really good tools to keep your systems and your processes up to date, to be able to look at where those threats are. And that means you can redirect any spending if you need to from a security perspective, any tooling or any efforts around monitoring or threat intelligence that comes into your organization. So when it comes to transforming for maturity, I actually can't fit all of this on one slide, unfortunately, so I need to talk through it a little bit. But on the top there are your dimensions. So on the left of the purple dotted line there, you have culture and strategy, automation, structure and processes, and collaboration and sharing. And these are the 4 dimensions that make up your DevOps maturity. Next in there is around having measurable criteria. So underneath those headings, you would have measurable criteria that would put you into one of those levels of maturity that you can see in the color boxes below. And what should come out of this is really information that you can directly look at, or anyone can look at, and put you in a specific box, put your team or your organization in a specific box to measure your level of maturity in those different areas. And you need to start thinking about getting team consensus on this as well. So it's not just one person's opinion. Get a Scrum team or a group of Scrum teams and really start to look at what this means for your organization. And those levels of maturity will hopefully go up the majority of the time, but sometimes they are going to come down as well, depending on what changes you have made. That is why doing this as a frequent exercise is very, very important, because it allows you to keep looking back at what you are doing and what you are doing to both improve what you are doing, what you have done, which may have had an adverse effect. So it's really important to keep looking at this information. And then what else comes out of here are recommendations, and those are recommendations on how to get to the next level. I would always say that if you are on, for instance, the yellow levels, always try and go one up. Right? You don't want to try and do too much. That's just too much for a short piece of time. So when it comes to automation, always try and go from scripting to task automation. Don't go all the way from scripting to process automation. That will come in time, and that will come as you mature. Don't try and do too much at once. Okay, so finally, it's around review. Okay, so reviewing is your measurement of maturity. So maturity is what we were just talking about there fundamentally, but you get there by doing maturity assessments. And there's plenty of maturity assessments that you can buy for your organization out there on the internet. Just a quick Google of those will give you some good examples. One of the best ones that I've seen actually is by a fellow ambassador at the DevOps Institute called Martyn Coupland. Most of you may or may not have heard of him. He's based out in the US. But Mark runs a DevOps engineering practice out in the US. And again, I will find a link and post the link into the chat, but he talks about and has some documentation and a to this in your organization, and you can prioritize a number of the different things up there as well. And it's really, really good because you can keep them and you can keep a track of scores, and you can see where you've come from and where you've gone to in all of those areas you're measuring. Key thing is that you don't just do those exercises and move on to the next thing, right? You need to take what you're measuring when it comes to maturity, you need to feed them back into any transformation sprints that you're running. Think of these as doing sprints that address technical debt. This is a transformation team that are responsible for maturing your DevOps practices within your organization. So this is something that you need to think about running alongside what you're delivering as a product. Keep using methods like continuous feedback loops, keep a track of the assessment scoring, and make sure that you do assessments on a per team basis. And if you start out doing them on a per team basis, continue to do them on a per team basis. It's no good changing how you are measuring things. That affects the outcome of the report, and that may outcome of what you feed into your next transformation sprint. So it's really, really important to make sure that you are catering to these things and making sure that you look at and think about what you are measuring and at what level, and make sure that you back up what you're doing and continue to measure at that same level. Otherwise, you will get A, skewed results, and B, inaccurate things to put into your next sprint. You may be trying to fix something that is not a problem. So I get asked quite a lot, what should I be measuring when it comes to success? What does success look like when it comes to DevOps? So I think it falls into 3 fundamental buckets: velocity, quality, and stability. Now, I don't want to bore everyone by going through all of these metrics, but there's some important things on here to talk about as well. And I just want to pick out a couple of ones that are kind of close to my heart in a lot of ways. Now, you need to be really careful about some of these metrics, and leadership need to understand that these metrics are not comparable between teams. Right? Deployment frequency, especially, and deployment duration, they're an indicator of velocity, and velocity is ultimately a measure for one team, that one team that you are working with. You can't compare Team A and Team B's velocity because they're fundamentally working on very different things. If they're using the same tools, if they're using the same programming languages, the same APIs, the same cloud platform, all of those things, even with all of them on top, they are fundamentally doing different things. They are fundamentally producing something different. So they are not comparable when it comes to velocity. So make sure that leaders understand that if you have Team A that is knocking out 40 story points a sprint and Team B is knocking out 90, that doesn't mean Team A are worse. It's just a measure for that team to how well they are performing for themselves and how accurately they are planning. And that is things that they use to then build up and take into their next sprint planning and retrospectives. They will discuss all of those things that have led to those numbers, and they will know how many they planned. So make sure that people don't try and measure teams up against each other. Next is around quality. I want to pick one out of quality. And there's plenty of different things that you can look at, and a lot of the tools that Mike was talking about will produce quality-based metrics like this as well. I think it's really easy to get your head too deep into the weeds when it comes to quality. And I think you need to go back to thinking about some of the fundamentals of DevOps. And some of those fundamentals are around test coverage. Test coverage is a fundamental. We need to make sure that we're measuring unit test coverage or your automated test coverage, whatever that looks like. If your goal is to increase your level of automated tests, then measure automated test coverage. Make sure you are measuring things that are relevant within your organization. Okay. Vulnerabilities is also important as well. Obviously, from a security perspective, standards violations is the highest level of maturity for me. I won't be thinking about standards violations until you're in a very mature practice. But looking at defect density and reintroduction rate, how often are these bugs being reintroduced back into the production environment? And how many bugs are there per 1,000 lines of code? That's what defect density is. Making sure that you have a consistent measure for those gives you a good idea of quality without going too detailed into the process. Finally, around stability. Now, if you remember last time I was here, there was a little discussion around platform availability or regular SLA-based availability versus MTTR. And my opinion then to now has not changed, in that platform availability, especially in a world where you control very little of the platform, especially in the cloud, it's not really an accurate measure of stability anymore. Mean time to resolution, I think, is a lot more accurate and a lot more meaningful for your organization. What is the average time it takes us to recover service? That is something that you can improve. You can work with your partners to improve. You can improve your tooling. You can improve your processing. There are lots of things that you can do there to reduce your MTTR. Whereas a percentage SLA, there may be nothing you could have done about that. And there may be nothing you could do about reducing the MTTR a huge amount, but there are things you can do at every step of the process around notifying customers of outages, restoration of service, invoking things like DR, recovering backups. All of those things can help reduce that MTTR. So it covers a lot more things rather than just saying, we had 95% availability. It looks like there was an outage on the cloud platform. We got this from the cloud vendor. Let's move on. That doesn't really tell us anything. That doesn't look to improve our processes and improve our products and ultimately improve our stability. So just very quickly, going back a little bit, just to finish off. So the circle of DevOps adoption is around making sure that it's where you want to go and where you are now. What do you want to make better? You can then move into that transform phase once you have those rigid definitions set around where you want to go and what it is that you've identified to improve. You can then start about doing that improvement to see if you can change what you want to be able to get to where you need to. And then that review stage is around taking a step back. It's almost like a retrospective. Take a step back, look at what you've done. Has it improved what you expected it to improve, or has it made it worse? The output from that can then go back into assessing and transforming again. And this is a form of continuous feedback in a lot of ways, and it's certainly a continuous improvement practice. But the key tools in here are around getting together as a team to assess, having people available to be able to transform, people that are deep subject matter experts within their domain to be able to improve what you are doing from a process perspective internally. And then finally, having that ability to step back with confidence as a team and be open and honest with each other and say what has worked, what has not worked. Like I say, it's that form of retrospective, and it's that level of improving maturity, and it is keeping that circle repeating as much as possible to be able to get to exactly where you want to be. And if you keep doing these things and keep repeating them in regular intervals and keep taking these step back to look at what you're doing outside of a product and look at how your processes are working, then that is fundamentally how you can, once you've got to where you want to get to, it's how you can keep achieving your DevOps goals and keep achieving where you want to push yourself as an organization. So that for this session, that's me done. I got one screen at the minute, so I'm not sure if there's any questions that have come up. So I'm just going to stop sharing so I can have a look. So fundamentally, it is around really, once you've got to that place you need to get to be able to continue to achieve great things that you've done as your organization, take a step back, look at what you've done, and focus on continuous improvement and continuous feedback, and keep going around those loops to be able to get to exactly where it is that you need to be and where your organization needs to be. And yeah, using those things that we talked about today, that notion of maturity and review is how you can achieve your DevOps goals.
That's fantastic, Martyn. Thank you very much. There's a few parallels there from stuff that I have been asked in the past as well, or needed to figure out where to kind of approach it from, and that's some really great insights and pointers into how to tackle kind of that question of, well, how do we measure what success looks like, especially as I'm sure we all know that in terms of DevOps, it's not just one specific area.
Yeah, so I'm kind of interested to ask people actually that are practicing DevOps within their own organizations, and you may see some of this with the stuff that you do as well, Liam. What metrics do you find people are or aren't using within their organization? Could you go to any of the people that you're working with, or anyone that's attending, could you go to your team that are practicing DevOps and say, are we any better than we were 6 months ago? Do we have metrics to back up? Or is it just a gut finger in the air feeling that it feels like we're better than we are?
So Ian says on his last contract, none of them.
So this is it, right? I think that's fairly common from certainly my interaction. I work with a lot of clients in the US, and the notion of measuring success with actual metrics and data is quite foreign to a lot of organizations. But all of them will say, we implemented A, B, C, D, we do this DevOps, that DevOps, and we're better than how we were 6 months ago. And I kind of feel bad in a lot of ways, because they're obviously quite proud of what they've achieved, and it's put them down very quickly when you go back and say, do you have any metrics to back that up? So they go, oh, no. It's like, well, how do you know you're any better than you were then? It's a fundamental question. And this is what it's about, really. It comes down to metrics. And it's the same with anything, not just DevOps. I just think, I don't know where it's gone wrong somewhere, but somewhere along the great level of DevOps adoption in the past few years, people seem to have forgotten the need to measure success with data. Data breeds, very successful businesses. You make better decisions, you make better business decisions when you have data to back up your decisions, rather than just sitting there thinking, oh, we'll do this today because it feels like the right thing to do. Businesses that feel like they're doing the right thing are ultimately not successful businesses, in my opinion.
Ben actually said, so what he's doing for measurements is, how many people do you need to work with, ask permission from, etc., to be able to ship a change?
So the last client that I had conversations with, who were actually quite mature, and I don't want to give away anything what they're doing, because they're doing some quite special stuff, but they didn't actually need anyone. It was automated. So they integrated with ServiceNow as a platform. They use DevOps as well, although any tooling or any good tooling obviously would have the same ability, but the pipeline's integrated to work with the change management process, right? And this is the other thing as well. A lot of organizations, I think, fall down when it comes to needing to integrate with existing processes within the business. And I think this is a lot of it's education, right? Where I've seen this work really well is where DevOps teams have spent time with the traditional teams that work in ITIL practices and that don't understand DevOps, and they've explained to them what they're doing. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I'd say it varies from organizations that I work with and how they view DevOps and how mature they are. The best ones that I've seen, developers commit code, and minutes or hours later, depending on the complexity of the build, it's out in whatever environment they've deployed it to, and ultimately production if nothing's gone wrong. The same organization also use application insights and Azure Monitor to roll back changes that generate exceptions. So they don't even do any manual rollback; it's all automated.
Big fan of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, actually doing it is is a lot harder than the sentence I just said there. But absolutely, it's a great place to be. But there are very few places doing it.
So, Martyn, I guess, and Mike, and really everybody here, I don't know if you've come up against the first sort of bottleneck or hurdle. It is if you've already got processes in place and you're working in a particular way, but you're not measuring that success. It's how do you get the baseline? That's the most difficult thing that I've come across with folks, is they don't know where to start with starting ultimately.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it actually makes it harder if you are already on the journey and you've not been collecting metrics that monitor your success. So if you do it from the outset, so you know where you were before you started, it's a lot easier to track it along the process because you've already got those measurements and those things in place. However, on the flip side of that, if you say, for instance, deployment frequency is something that you want to look at, then it's quite easy to go into Azure DevOps and look at how long it took the pipelines to run from build all the way through to when it was released to production. That is your baseline. It's the same with any point in time, I would say. Anything that's metric based is based on data. So, or any meaningful metric is data based. It's a data point. So, any point in time where you run your set of your metrics, that is your baseline. I would say it's not something that is open to interpretation. I think if a metric's open to interpretation, it's not specific enough. I would say.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else thinks any different or has any other views on that, but that's certainly my opinion, that if it's database, you should just be able to run it at any point in time, and that's your baseline. If you don't have any data, that's your baseline from that point forward.
Cool. Something else in the chat. I've just lost my own chat window. So.
I actually like Mark's question that Mike was asking. You find certain industries are better than others when adopting measuring. Are others more resistant or difficult? So this is, I think I get asked this one every time I do a session somewhere. Healthcare, absolutely. I would definitely agree with healthcare. FSI is an interesting one. So FSI in Europe, absolutely, they are easier to work with than FSI in the US.
Yeah, I think especially if you're working in startups in the FSI sector as well.
The more established players, it's very difficult, but it is even more difficult working with them in the US.
Yeah, for sure.
Banking and insurance companies are the worst. I mean, they think that they think that they need all those rules, and that they think that they are so right with their legislation, and most of their data is wrong because they don't really know the laws, but they're the hardest ones. Healthcare, they're just scared. That's all.
Yeah. I would add into that aviation. I used to work in aviation for a bit, and this is maybe a bit of a generalist comment, and there will be certainly someone that can find an example that goes against this, but I would say any industry that is traditionally risk averse, you will find they're more hesitant or resistant to adopting the things that you talk about every meetup.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Cool. So are there any more questions, folks? Let's just double check on YouTube. No, we're okay there. So a huge thank you for that, Martyn, and to you as well, Mike, for coming along this evening and giving two fantastic talks. They will be both available for you to catch up on YouTube pretty much after we stop streaming, actually, and I'll throw some links out for that as well. If you are not already, if you're happy to still sit at your computer or whatever, you may notice that I'm also wearing an Azure Live t-shirt, which is a channel that I run around Microsoft tech alongside a bunch of other people. So we have a show. I'm not doing the show now, but one of my co-hosts, Pete Gallagher, is currently about to start in about 5 minutes a show around IoT called IoT Live, where they'll be chatting through some of the last week's kind of happenings in the IoT world, and it's really really great to see. And tomorrow we'll be playing some Among Us with some Microsoft folks as well on the channel, which will be good. But yes, so thank you all for coming. The next meetup will be on the 30th of March. So I will see you all then, and have a good rest of the week, everybody.
Same to you.
Thanks everyone.
And Martyn, great talk, by the way.
Yeah, likewise. Cheers, Mike.
It's really
Speak to
good.
you soon.
All right. Thanks, guys.